One of the things I want to talk about, we've talked about divestment, so that's a whole bunch of groups taking money away from the oil and gas sector in many different ways.
Hmm.
You also have the whole effort called ESG, the Environmental Social Governance Movement. Can you tell us briefly what the heck that is?
Well, they're all related, really. ESG, decarbonization, net zero, that's all part of the in divestment. It's all part of the E part of ESG, which is environmental, social governance. And it started out that, the shareholder took a second seat or took a back seat to the stakeholder. And ESG believes that we should be more concerned about all of the stakeholders versus the ultimate shareholder of a company. And we should be doing, you're doing well with your investments and you're also doing good for the world.
Hmm.
But it's all under the name of ESG, but divestment, net zero, those are destructive policies, and especially for Canadians and for Canadian sectors. Um, you know, Reaching net zero, for example, it just would require draconian declines in the use of coal, oil, natural gas. These are
Hmm.
almost impossibilities, especially in 25 years or 26 years, and so all of the under the moniker of ESG falls all of these policies, and they're all aimed at destroying the oil and gas sector.
So these things are all related. So when they talk about net zero, like somehow in what is it, the year 2050, I mean, it keeps changing. It was 2020, then it was 2030, now it's
Yeah.
2050, where
Yes.
they would not use any oil and gas. So that's so called a vision for net zero, and that's been promoted for years by the United Nations and other
Yes.
international bodies. So people have kind of got onto that train. And then you have the ESG movement. It was basically a way to evaluate the use of money and kind of do an index, like a kind of a prize for. And they, of course, all the activists all make up the indexes, don't they? In terms of how they evaluate, your use of your money, whether it's socially
Hmm.
responsible, whether it's environmentally responsible, and from a quote governance point of view. So a lot of this is kind of fancy language that is
Yes.
confusing, I think, to a lot of people. Yet this is a game basically to, again, take away all the money from oil and gas or anything that the activists don't like. Is that kind of, am I being fair or am I oversimplifying it?
No, that's right. They've stated in their proposals that their goal is to eliminate the oil and gas sector. So, their ExxonMobil had a proposal by these groups, and they outright said, we want to we want this company to not produce oil and gas anymore. So I
Hmm.
don't know what
Hmm.
ExxonMobil is going to do, but they're not, that they want to destroy the sector. There's
Wow.
an
And
underlying
they,
hostility, and it's quite strong.
and it's interesting. As you know, I'm a student of history, so I look at these kinds of actions also through the lens of how different totalitarian regimes and actors today have a kind of a playbook. One of which is they try to obviously censor what you say. They try to name you and shame you. They try to edit you out, which is really crazy because we need healthy debate. We need to talk about
Mhm.
our analysis, our sincere attempts to get at the truth. I mean, that's what's enabled our civilization to move forward is the truth. We got to stand up for the truth.
Yes.
But in this context, it's like they're using a playbook that's familiar to us all, Gina, and that is they name and shame. They kind of demonize the
Mhm.
sector. They demonize the
Yes.
oil and gas sector. How are they doing that? What are your observations?
Some things that they're doing is obviously passing policies that demonize the sector. So, you mentioned the truth, and let's talk about Bill C-59, which was just passed, where an oil and gas company can't even speak about what they've been working on or any kind of emissions reductions that they've been doing, because under their fear of huge penalties, because they're going to be accused of greenwashing or not telling the truth about what they're doing. So they're trying to muzzle our companies. CEOs can't talk about what their any advances that they've made without proof and measured against some nebulous standards. So the whole policy regime is against the oil and gas sector.
Yeah. So
And
C59, if there's
hmm,
one thing that you want to remember out of this discussion would be C59. But C59 is a bill that's proposed in Parliament. It hasn't been passed yet.
no, it has been passed.
It has been passed.
Yeah,
Oh gosh. So we've got a,
it was passed in the fall.
but this is a stunning piece of legislation. This is like a
Yep.
gag order
Yes.
on the oil and gas sector. So they can't talk about their quote efforts that they're making to care for the environment. They can't talk about really anything. They can't defend themselves as an
No.
industry. I mean, it's ridiculous. So what happens is, and there's heavy fines to this. I mean, this is just
Yes.
like out of
Very heavy.
the former Soviet Union as I look at it. I mean, this is just totally trying to hobble an industry, and it's kind of outrageous, isn't it? Like, tell us about the fines, Gina.
Well, I mean, if the Canadian oil and gas sector didn't realize that they were at war, then now they
Yeah,
should
gee
realize it
whiz.
because it's crystal clear now. So the penalties are not small. For corporations, a first-time offense can be up to $10 million, or and a second conviction would raise it to $15 million. And the scary part is that in addition to these penalties and fines, next year, so a year from now, activist groups can actually use Bill C-59 to bring their own claims against oil and gas companies. So they can bring a claim against an oil and gas company, which will certainly result in costly and time consuming legal battles.
So there you have it. Bill C-59, among so many others, is all about empowering the activists so that they can punish and, frankly, I would say persecute critical parts of our economy, including oil and gas, which really relates to every part of the economy because oil and gas is used across the board, forestry, mining. I mean, the list goes
Yep.
on and on.
Yes.
But also, this is basically attack on the standard of living and productivity of our country. I mean, we all know that much of the inflation that's been created in this country is by the war on oil and gas. It's the
Yes.
war on energy. Carbon
Yep.
taxes do this. So this is all bad public policy because it's not transparent, it's not accountable, it's not clear, and they don't allow for healthy debate and discussion. And I want to just give you an example that I think is related to this. And it's very interesting because there's been a number of parties. In fact, I think Post Media, a number of years ago, they made a freedom of information request to the federal government about to Environment, and now it's called, of course, Climate Change Canada. They
Hmm.
announced research regarding the climate crisis and the rationalization for increased carbon taxes. And of course, Post Media made the information request asking for the rationale, the reports, show us the receipts, show us the evidence of your rationale. And over years, the federal government has dragged its feet and has yet to release that information. What does that tell you, Gina?
I don't believe that the analysis has been done, the background analysis has been done, because if it were done, we would never, we would never pass these types of policies, because it would be obvious that we are, you know, trying to strangle our most important sector, one of our most productive sectors. And why would we do that? Why would Canada as a country want to strangle one of our most productive sectors? So many jobs, high paying jobs. So,
Yeah,
and as we mentioned before, so many sectors rely on affordable energy to exist. So, if the analysis were done, I'm not sure that it would have. I think it would have informed the people making the policies of, to look at things in a different light, because they would have to realize that killing this industry is not going to be beneficial for Canadians
indeed.
and
Yeah,
the
it's
world,
it's
for that
it's
matter.
it's truly not realistic. So, is there a way to summarize what these kinds of laws do to the average Canadian? I think it's hard to kind of connect the dots here, but how does this really impact Canadians ultimately? I mean, you've got ultimately the potential of hundreds of thousands of people directly involved in oil and gas being laid off, obviously, but
Right.
it's everybody else who's related to it. It's kind of like all the marbles are on the table here, aren't they, Gina?
Yes, well, if you look at mining companies, they're exploring up north. Are there power generators up north? Can you plug in a an electric dump truck
Mm-hmm.
up north? No, you can't. So for many years to come, there's going to be a need for the oil and gas sector. And what I
Mm-hmm.
think people don't realize is that it will all filter down. If we don't have the supply, then prices will go up. Demand is going up with, we mentioned before, AI. The demand is not stopping. Oil and gas, the pie, size of the pie, the demand pie is just getting bigger and bigger year after year. Oil and gas has not peaked. It shows no sign of peaking. All the reports, the latest reports, it's going up exponentially. And
Mm-hmm.
so Canadians have to realize that we need to invest in this sector. We need to be players in this sector, which we are. And we are, top players, top tier players. And we should be fostering that. And that will be, good for the environment because our companies have high environmental standards. We have very high corporate governance standards, and we have high social standards. So if you look at, the ESG components, Canadian companies are, they're top tier players. And so
Mm-hmm.
why would we want to demonize this sector? Why would we want to destroy this sector?
Right on. And I think your point about social governance is really insightful. I mean, I think a lot of Canadians should be very proud of how the oil and gas sector, as one example, works so closely with many First Nations who are,
Mm,
critical partners and many owners of these developments. So the opportunity is to cast a vision of prosperity for all Canadians,
yes.
including First Nations. And to me, that's an exciting opportunity. But this all shuts that down, doesn't it?
Well, yes, and often it's funny that you say prosperity because oftentimes the proposals that are, they're called anti-ESG, anti-ESG proposals that are being submitted to the banks and to say, no, hold on a
Mm-hmm.
second, you need to invest in oil and gas, not divest. But I would say they're pro-prosperity. So let's focus on prosperity, prosperity for all Canadians. Give them the opportunity to supply our oil and gas to the people, the world that is demanding it, and the countries that are demanding it.
Okay. So there's been a lot of things gone wrong in the darkness. And so we need to cast off the veil as we renew
Yep.
not only our level of thinking when it comes to the use of our money, but frankly, the renewal of our country as a free and democratic society. We need desperately in this country to have transparency.
Yes.
So, this is obviously part of the lesson, is it not, Gina?
Yes, as I said before, the truth will set you free, and
Indeed.
transparency is truth.
Well, Gina, indeed, the truth will set us free. So as we look towards the next year, it's been a delight to see you again and catch up with you. And I certainly commend you on behalf of all of us for your courage and your leadership on this very important issue.
Thank you, David. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on the show. Always a pleasure.
Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.